The post-World Cup euphoria was dampened down by tales of bribery accusations and off-the-field scandals, and completely washed away by ugly scenes of player violence on the pitch and fan violence off it. The troubled footballing days of the early 80s were back with a vengeance. The worry is they won't go away, for football's problems now, more than ever, seem inextricably linked with society's woes.
We have to face the reality that our society is violent, but football is not violent.
It's a problem that is a societal problem, a lot less than a soccer problem.
It's not the sport that's bringing out the violence. I really think that it's something in society.
Le football est associé au plaisir.
Football should be associated with pleasure, excitement, youth, and not with violence and brutality. Words that should not be associated with football.
Be it football or be it society, violence has to be the biggest concern. Certainly in Italy, where fighting before the Serie A game between Genoa and AC Milan claimed the life of a young spectator. A nation mourned. And in an unprecedented move, all domestic sport in Italy was cancelled the following Sunday. World Cup star Alexi Lalas, playing in Italy for Padova, looked on in bewilderment. Hooliganism appears to be a disease beyond the comprehension of some Americans.
Our sports are much more for the family, much more calm, much more, there's much more respect within the stadium. I say, on the other hand, our streets and our society are war zones. But what I can't understand is how someone can take their own life into their own hands just by going to see a sporting event.
As we've seen, there's been a worrying proliferation in Italy. It's still a problem in England, but no longer purely an English disease. The misery escalated in France, where a spectator died amid violent clashes. The Netherlands' reputation for hooliganism grows, and as ever, the violence isn't confined to the stadium. Greek tragedies were played out on the terraces there. And that's without dwelling on the trouble in Germany, the old Eastern Bloc, and South America. There's also been a rise in the number of radical supporters groups, like the masked ultras in Italy. To them, football is more than a game. They're no less passionate about football in Spain, where sellout crowds are commonplace and fighting is not. Could the fact fan violence has rarely been an issue there, at least in recent years, give an indicator to other countries as to where they're going wrong?
I think it all depends on the level of fanaticism. In Spain, there is a lot of passion for soccer, and perhaps in other places there is more fanaticism that's more dangerous. Spanish soccer has changed in the last few years. It favors better soccer, it favors entertainment, and therefore makes the sport a festivity and not a combat.
It was war, though, for some of England's fans in a so-called international friendly against Ireland in Dublin, which came just 2 weeks after the young Genoa supporter died in Italy. These scenes would be followed by more at English FA Cup matches and by Chelsea fans abroad. Enough to cause the English game almost irreparable damage? Not so, says their Football Association chief.
Provided the FA responds, and in many cases is ahead of the game, the lasting damage should be very small.
American author Bill Buford, who spent 6 years befriending hooligans to gather material for his book Among the Thugs, believes football violence will always be around, but tends to be more prevalent at some times than others.
The game has always had a history of violence. There's been violence from the very early games in Scotland at the turn of the century, but there hasn't been what there has been, say, in the last 2 decades, a kind of deliberate violence, of people actually going to games to seek violence. In a way, it's this generation's rock and roll. It's a cult thing. It's sort of, violence is trendy, violence is fun.
But violence isn't acceptable, nor will it be tolerated. So what do the authorities intend to do about that? And indeed the curious mirroring of the thuggish trend on the pitch. Player violence.
The problems which we've experienced in the recent past have had one common link, and that's the standards of personal behaviour of the people involved. And whatever we can do to uphold the image of the game of football and the footballers who earn their living from it and who are proud to earn their living from it, we will do so.
The answers to football's problems may lie behind the walls of power, in the courts or the offices of governing bodies. But will the walls built up on and off the field in the season of shame prove impenetrable? On tomorrow's World Sport, we'll take a closer look at the on-field violence and off-the-field scandals which rocked the game, before discovering in part 3 what's being done to alleviate the problems.